calling all educators with a passion for teaching and a health for faith. Get ready for a transformative journey with the Educators with Oil podcast, where host Ronnette Branham is dedicated to helping teachers become better through biblical strategies.
Welcome back to Educators with Oil. I'm your hostess, Ronnette Branham, and this is a space for educators. Welcome back to Educators with Oil. Sorry about that. I'm your hostess, Ronnette Branham, and this is a space. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. This is a space where we educators understand that teaching is not just instructional. That it's not just instructional, that we are teaching from freedom and not compliance. So I want to thank you for being here. Let me see. 1 second. All right, here we go. This is formation work. So again, I'm your hostess, Ronnette Branham. And if this is your first time here, know this: every episode is about walking with God and teaching as we lift students up. 1 second. I am so apologetic. 1 second. Okay. I have to take something off my screen for 1 second. Okay. Let me take this off my screen because it's distracting. Okay. Again, thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining today's episode, because when students know... Oh, 1 second. Okay. Today's episode, this is about a Black history episode, and not the kind, that stays in February. It's the kind that lives in timeless. It's timeless and trivia, right? It's not just asking you questions and seeing if you know who was who in Black history. This is not that, right? This is we're talking about a blueprint of freedom. And that is so exciting to me to know that we can teach, we can teach students to live out of their freedom. We can teach out of freedom and not saying, okay, let's teach whatever the district gives us to teach and how we can educate our students. My apologies. So we don't want to just, teach out of compliance. We want to teach out of freedom. And that's what this is, Blueprint of Freedom. And it is called Blueprints of Freedom, a Black History. 1 second. I'm practicing. This is what's happening right now. I have this episode. I have a workshop on Saturday, and this is the episode. It's like a practice and a pre-trial for me to execute this lesson. And the lesson, again, we're teaching from freedom, right? We're teaching from freedom, and that's what we want to teach our students. We want to teach about legacy and not just about a timeline, what happened when in Black history, which is American history anyway. So we're going to school and we're learning American history, but we're leaving out some things. And we don't want to leave out some things. But at the same time, we want to teach through a legacy that came through others who worked for our freedom, right? Who worked for our citizenship. And so that's where we are. So I want to begin with a story, and that is my own story. I didn't grow up, excuse me, I didn't grow up where people were constantly naming my brilliance. I didn't grow up that. They were constantly naming my lineage or explaining where drive came from. Nobody set me aside and said, this is who you are, this is where you come from, and this is your path. I didn't have that. Some people did, and I thank God for you for having that. What I grew up instead, what I had besides that, I had something small but determined. And it was an internal fire that I have and that I continue to see. And I can look back in my life and I can see that fire that was burning. So it showed when I was in my formative years. I can look back and see that fire in my formative years. When I was from third grade through the beginning of seventh grade, I went to a predominantly white school district. White school. Was at the same school for 4 years. Then we moved to the middle school. Same thing. Predominantly white. You could count the black students, if you want to say African American students. One was from South America, so I don't know. That's America. So on 10 fingers or less for any given year. Sixth grade, it was about 10 in the whole school. Elementary, 2 grades, 2 classes per grade. And so in my grade, in sixth grade, we had 4 black students, 2 boys, 2 girls. And they put 1 boy and 1 girl in each class, perfectly distributed. You know, don't knock them. They were trying. I believe they wanted everybody to, you know, be diverse. And so have a black girl and a black boy in their class. So, but there's one particular moment that lives in my body still to this day. I was talking to somebody about it the other day, and it's so funny how it's so vivid in my head. And I can use this story in various places in my life. I could be talking about fitting in. I could be talking about having an adult in your life. I could be talking about anything. In this one particular story that lives in me, I can use it for so many things. I could use it when I see students saying they don't have anybody to play with. All kind of things I can use it. But in this particular time, it was my gym class. And during this unit of study, we were studying, I believe it was some kind of Olympics, because we were doing the 50-yard dash, 100-yard dash. We were doing like the standing broad jump, the running broad jump. I think that's what it's called. But this one day we had to run around the blacktop 4 times. And so we had to run around the blacktop 4 times. And it was about, you know how you have like a kickball field, I guess that's what it's called. So maybe about 4 of them. We had to run around 4 times. And I was fast. Now, no Usain Bolt, or however you say his name, no Sha'Carri Richardson, probably could have been. I don't know. I didn't wasn't nurtured. But I was really fast. And so I was fast enough to run with the boys. I didn't run with the boys. There was one particular boy who he was the fastest in the class, and I probably could have ran with him. Remember my demographics, so don't get it twisted. Don't think I'm saying I'm running with, you know, my people. I wasn't, right? Not that's just what it is. And so I was fast. I could have run with the boys. I didn't. I ran with the girls. Not because it made sense, because it did not make sense. Not because it matched my ability, because it did not. But simply because it was safer. It was safest thing to do. My physical ability fit with the boys, right? But my identity did not. I didn't fully belong with the girls either. I remember the boys were running already. The girls were having a conversation about who they're going to run with. And they were saying, I'm going to run with you. You're going to run with me, all this kind of stuff. Then the question turned to me. You know, I'm a little different. So the question turned to me, who's Ronnette going to run with? So this girl said to me, Ronnette, who are you going to run with? Mind you, this was, I don't know how to say it. This was one of the slowest little girls. One of the slowest little girls in my class. So I said, you know how kids just answer a question. They don't think about it. They just answer. I said, I'll run with you. I'll run with you, right? I think about that so funny when I think about it now. That's what you did. That's what you chose, right? So I chose fitting in over fully being myself. Period. That's what I chose. And what stays with me, because that stays with me to the run, and choosing to run with the girls, so I wouldn't have to run by myself. That stuck with me. But another thing that stuck with me was the fact that there was no adult to pull me aside and say, this is how you be you in this space, right? You don't have to disappear to belong. There was nobody who said that to me. Because I think now, if this was me, if I was a teacher in that class, I would have started running with me. I would have started running with Ronnette. I would have started running with that little girl. I would have got next to her and I said, let's go. That's all I would have said. Let's go, Ronnette. I would have said it. Nobody said that to me. And I think I'm trying to figure out where was the gym teacher. Maybe he was across the other side. I don't remember him being right there next to us. I don't remember that. That's funny because I don't remember the adult in the scenario, but I remember everything else. And so that, when I think about that, that is where I can see the fire that I had inside of me burning. But at the same time, I saw, I could look back and I could say, it's a word I've been saying lately because we are like tossed and cognitive dissonance, right? I knew what to do. I knew I didn't belong with those girls. Everybody knew I didn't belong with those girls, right? I pulled through. I pulled ahead the last round, the last lap. I pulled ahead. Of course I did. But at the same time, people saw it. They were cheering. I don't know what they were cheering for because the time was still slow. It didn't matter. It didn't matter that I pulled ahead because the time was slow. I remember the time. That's so funny because I remember the time. Maybe not to the seconds, but I remember the minutes. It was 11 minutes and something. It should have been 5. It should have been 4 something. It was 11. It was 11 minutes and something. I never forget that. I don't remember the seconds, but I know. And I know that it should have been 5 or 4 because there was another girl in the 5th grade. When I told her, she was like, what? Did you say 11 minutes? She ran like 5 minutes or something, 4, right? I really don't even remember the minutes I should have ran, but I know it was around that time, and I know my time was 11 minutes. I'm running with the girls, trying to fit in, and then at the end, I know they didn't fit in, so then I sped around. Okay, they were cheering, but it didn't matter. Okay, it didn't matter. So I just want to say, and this is what I get from that. Before students can perform for us, they need permission to be themselves. Absolutely need permission to be themselves. There's nothing else really that goes with that. There's nothing else really, even though I said that story can fit almost anywhere. It can fit almost anywhere, but you have to know that students don't know how to be themselves. And then if we don't have anybody talking to us about it, telling us about our identity and who we are and how to walk in it, and not just try to fit in, that is something that we need. We need it. Anyway, so what I didn't know back then, is that the fire, it didn't start with me. It didn't start with me. When I remember I later transferred in the 7th grade, I later transferred to an all-black school in the 7th grade. I expressed culture shock in the opposite direction. That sounds weird, right? Because I'm black. I grew up with African-American family. I went to church, so there was the African-Americans. I did all that, right? That is who I am. But I went to a school that I've never gone to, a kind of school, a demographic that it was just different. It was just different. And so I went from quiet classrooms and new books to outdated furniture and older textbooks. The students there were loud, expressive, and unafraid to use their voices. That was exciting to me. That was exciting. I'm just remembering that thing, right? This is what I learned. I came there with. I learned how to sit, how to wait, and how to be compliant. So that's where I was. That's where I came from. It is what it is. But those students learned how to speak, how to show personality, and how to take up space. They took up their space. They unapologetically, they took up their space. And then one day, while I was at this the school, predominantly African-American, I had an experience, and we had an assembly. If I was to talk about with somebody, I would assume that it was a Black History program. Could not have been. That could just be something that they do. But the thing was, they had a choir. The school had a choir. That was exciting to me. Never came from a school with a choir. Now, and that's the thing, right? But I didn't come from a school with a choir, an actual choir. And they were singing a song that I never heard before. Never heard it before. Never heard of it before. And I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about. If you have any idea the song that I'm talking about, put it in the chat. I'll give you a second to see if you know the song that I'm talking about that I never heard before, but they were singing it. Everybody was standing. It could have not been everybody standing. They were used to it, but it felt like everybody was standing. It felt like everybody was singing. The song was long. Everybody, the choir sang this long song, and they knew all the words. So it was beautiful to me. And it was a Black national anthem. I never heard of a Black national anthem. Never knew there was such a thing. So I stood there in awe. I listened to those words. Those words were dynamic to me. And guess what? I didn't fully belong in this space either. I didn't. I loved it, but I didn't fit in. I was nurtured a different way than these students were. And so I was at a place there. And it wasn't until I was much older, really actually in adulthood, that I understood where that fire came from, that it didn't originate with me, that who it came through. So I was thinking it came from these people, but it didn't come from these people. It came through these people, this fire. It came through Mary McLeod Bethune, who built the school with $5 and a belief that Black students deserve brilliance. It came from my favorite, I'm going to say Henry P. Newton, but it came from my favorite, it came through my favorite, the Black Panther Party, who fed and educated students with a program that the nation later modeled. You know, they later modeled it. And it came through Octavius Catto from Philadelphia, who right over the bridge here, he fought for education, he fought for voting rights and freedom, and he paid for it with his life. So that is where it came through them. And I did not know their names when I was growing up. I didn't know, but their work, it was shaping me every single day. It was shaping me anyway. I didn't have to know their names, but their work was evident in my life. Absolutely. So as an adult, I finally understood something, that when you grow up without a blueprint, you end up creating that blueprint on your own. You build one by yourself. And my drive, I learned that my drive, it wasn't accidental, it was inherited. And that's something that is awesome for us to know, that it was inherited. My fire, it wasn't random, it was legacy. Students today, they should not have to wait to adulthood to understand that their brilliance is part of a historical continuum. They shouldn't have to wait to that like I did. I was grown, before I understood about Black brilliance, that we deserved it, that we were brilliant. I didn't understand that. I wasn't taught that. And we have to do something different with our students today, that they grow up knowing that. I think about when I was younger and I used to come across people who went to an historically Black college, right? And they would come home from school and they would be so proud. They would talk differently. They weren't the same. It just was something different about them. And it was because they were taught their legacy. They were taught their brilliance. And I understand that now. So this is what I see as a tension right now in our classrooms. Students sit in classrooms where they don't see themselves, right? They don't see themselves. Let me see. Um, they don't they don't see themselves. Identity is minimized. History is fragmented. We know this. Purpose is unclear, and freedom is undefined. And the danger isn't just what the students don't know, it's what they believe about themselves in the absence of truth. So that right there is something that we have to recognize at this moment in time. When identity is minimized, students internalize limitation. I didn't know who I was, so I was limited in what I could do. I could have run by myself with no problem if I knew who I was. I didn't need those girls. I didn't have to run with those girls. I didn't. I could have ran by myself and just took off, did my own thing, right? But my limitations were internalized, period. When purpose is unclear, motivation collapses. If I don't know what my purpose is, I can't be motivated. We're motivated towards what, right? I don't know. When freedom is undefined, compliance gets mistaken for success. We talked about that the other day. When with students, I'm sitting correctly, I'm listening, I'm raising my hand, I'm doing everything, and I'm successful because I'm doing everything the teacher wants. Teacher loves me. I'm successful, right? Not necessarily the case. Doesn't make you successful. It makes you compliant. That's like, I remember I was talking to somebody and they were talking about the fact that taking tests was easy because all they're doing is memorizing things. From a child, this person, very young child, just could memorize things just like that. We used to call it photographic memory. It's not even that, because I understand that's not really a true thing, photographic memory, but it's like that. Just can remember things. And so we think that's success. It may be if you want to pass a test, it may be, but that's not really success just because you're being compliant. And teachers, especially African American teachers, are sitting in classrooms doing their very best in systems that were not designed for us, with us in mind. Just leave that right there. We're doing our best, but that's not, the systems weren't made for us. They weren't thinking about us. So here is the blueprint. This is the blueprint that I've created through my own life and through my 20 plus years in education. And this is what the blueprint teaches: identity, who am I, purpose, why am I here, and liberation, what can I become? And I love that because, one second, liberation, I love that because it gives us something. It gives us something to look forward to. To look into and say, this is how I can teach my students. Teach them about their identity. Teach them their purpose. Teach them liberation. What they can become. And so this order, it matters. I'm doing a few things at the same time here. So that's the blueprint, right? I'm doing a few things at the same time. The order matters. It absolutely does matter, because we rush. This is what we sometimes do. We rush into achievement before identity. That's what we do. Or we push for outcomes before purpose. We want somebody to have outcomes, and they don't even know who they are. They don't know why they are here, but we want some outcomes, right? And then we wonder why students are unengaged. We wonder that because we're pushing for achievement and outcomes before identity. You cannot do that, right? So liberation is not the reward at the end, but it's a condition that we teach from. We teach from liberation. And this is not just pedagogy. This is not just pedagogy, it's biblical. It's biblical. Let me put that back up there. Let me last for where. Let me put that back up there. Okay. My apologies. So John 8:32 reminds us that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Right? Freedom is a classroom starting point, not the finish line. You know, we like, well, I'm all done now. I'm free. No, you start from freedom, and then you can move from there, and you can educate your students the way they need to be educated. And so I want to do something important really quick. So in a workshop, what I would do, I would place the ancestor cards on the table. And but since this is a podcast, I just want you to notice the connections that are forming in your thinking, right? So I'm going to give you some ancestors, and then I'm going to give you some real world student circumstances, right? So I have Mary McLeod Bethune. She taught from education. This is her beliefs. She taught from education. She taught that empowerment. She taught empowerment and compliance, right? Not compliance. Education is freedom. Teach as empowerment, not compliance, right? And Octavius Catto, his viewpoint was students are current civic actors. So we are to cultivate leaders now. And then the Black Panther Party, they thought children cannot learn if their basic needs are not met. So you got to care first and then teach. Then we have Ruth right here, right? Her thinking was access is systemic responsibility, right? Equity is not optional. So she taught from going to the district level. And Dr. Constance Clayton, her viewpoint was transformation requires policy, not just passion. So you can be passionate about transforming the students, but you need policy that backs that up. And then Sonia Sanchez, she says language is power, and that cultural voice is an academic asset. So your cultural voice is an asset. And then we have one more, Paul Robeson. Two more. Paul Robeson, he says education produces global citizens, not obedient workers. So that's what he was looking for when he wanted to educate students. Barbara Smith, identity is intersectional. Self-definition is resistance. I'm African American. I'm going to teach from that, and then I won't be invisible. Right? That is what you call resistance. These ancestors right here are not symbols. They are strategies in human form. So you say, let's look at them as a blueprint. They are a blueprint, right? They are the strategy, thinking from their vantage point, the way they thought, right? So now consider a student who believes that they aren't smart enough, a student who never sees their culture reflected in the classroom, in the school. They never see their culture reflected. You know, that's seeable, right? A student bold outside, but silent inside the classroom. What's happening there, right? A student carrying adult responsibilities at home. That happens, right? And then these students are not problems. We have to look at them as not problems to be solved. They are signals. So the question is not what's wrong with the student, what's wrong with this student, particular student. The question is, which ancestors' thinking does this moment require from me? Right? If you see a student that has adult responsibilities, you might think Black Panther Party, we need to care for the student before we can teach the student, right? A student that thinks they're not smart enough, you may think like Mary McLeod Bethune, that Black students deserve brilliance. You know, they deserve it. They have to understand that they are brilliant, that they come from brilliance, that they deserve brilliance in the education. Not like I had when I was in the 7th grade. When we came, I got to the other school and the books were old. School was old. No, the people were authentic and I loved it, but they didn't have everything that the other school had, and it was noticeable. Oh, I don't know if it was only noticeable because I went through the system. I don't know how come that is that. But that, that is what it is. And we deserve brilliance. Why do we think we deserve second best? That's not how this works, right? And so when we align teaching with legacy, identity, and purpose, students don't just learn content. They learn that who they're allowed to become. That is where I said that is that freedom. Who can I become after I learn my identity, right? After I learn my purpose. Freedom is right along with it. We teach from freedom, and then we'll teach them their legacy. We'll teach them that they're brilliant and they come from brilliance and they deserve brilliance. And it's not even it's not even optional. Hey, Sparkle Belly, thanks for joining us, right? And when we align teaching with legacy, identity, and purpose, they don't just learn content. Again, I'm saying the same thing. They learn who they're allowed to become. That is Black history doing the work. Absolutely doing the work. It's doing the work. And then, let me see. I got two mice over here. I don't know if you ever felt this cognitive dissonance when you were in classroom or when you were in the classroom. You knew there was a little bit more. You knew there was a fire that was down inside. Put fire in the chat. Put fire in the chat if you felt that growing up or you saw it. Because I even have something. If somebody asked me teaching about legacy and the historical continuum that's flowing through us, every student doesn't need that. Yes, every student does. When you see a Black child, an African American child, learning their legacy and learning from freedom, that benefits everyone in the classroom. So this is not, like I said, this is not a timeline of Black history. It's not that. This is freedom being taught, our legacy being taught daily, affirming students, teaching them about story. How, I don't know, I was talking to my students this morning where we read a book and we were trying to figure out before the book was over what this lady did. She was a Mexican woman and she was a grandmother and she was getting ready for work and she was talking about her voice. Her voice was grand and she used to practice making all kinds of sounds just to get her voice flowing before she went to work. And she was a storyteller. And people were excited to hear. But what happens in our before when our history wasn't in the textbooks, we had to tell story. We taught legacy through story. We taught lineage through story. We taught freedom through story. Who we are, and that came down. If you ever saw the movie Roots, when they were telling stories, they were telling their lineage, right? They were telling their histories through story. And story, when we grow up, we didn't, we weren't sitting by a tree, but story, our voice came through at bedtime, sitting by the bed when our parents are telling stories about our grandparents and our great grandparents, how they came to this state or wherever they came from. We sit in kitchens where we're helping our parents cook and they're telling us stories, right? We sit on porches, people come around and they're telling stories, and story is taught as curriculum. That is curriculum when we weren't allowed in the history books, right? When it wasn't being taught in school. Now they're trying to go back to that, but that is just, it is what it is. We have to teach through story. When we teach about local history, when students see their local history, hear their local history, they understand that this is scholarship. It's not just nostalgia, telling stories and talking about the local heroes and the local movements. It's not just nostalgia. We're just not, oh, my grandmother was this and my grandfather was that. Those are, that is scholarship. And that students need to understand that their lived experience is scholarship. That it's authority. It's cultural authority. It's scholarly authority. That they can tell. You see, I went off my notes. I left those notes because this got real. This absolutely got real. Yes. And it is. We have to understand. We have to teach our students that your lived experience is scholarship. That this is real, and you can connect with that and connect with your local history outside of the classroom, outside of the textbooks. And that let me just go back, ground myself one more time, because I love this. Once I understood that we're teaching from freedom, that when we can talk to our students and we're teaching, we're giving affirming language as we're teaching our students, because what the student believes about themselves, they believe that before assessment even happens in the classroom. That is just what it is. So we have to instill in our students affirming language. You are brilliant. You come from brilliance. When your parents talk to you about your legacy, your lineage, that is history. That is curriculum. That is scholarship. That is sitting in a classroom, whether the classroom is a kitchen or your bedside, right? That is scholarship. Your life, your experience is true. You can say, I know this. This is not something I heard. This is what I know. I know I grew up in the 70s and then the 80s. And like I said, I went to an all-white school, Caucasian, whatever we called it. I don't know what we say it now. It wasn't the best experience. And I can tell you, this is what I know, right? That's scholarship. And so I'm going to get off that. So I want to end by going back to that young girl. She didn't know Bethune. She didn't know her name. I did not know her name. I never heard of her. I didn't know Catto walked the streets of Philadelphia. I did not know that. I especially didn't know the Black Panthers fed and educated students before school. I did not know that. But I did know there was something burning inside of me. I did know that. I couldn't name it. I didn't know. But now I understand. I know I didn't call it identity. I didn't call it purpose. And I definitely didn't call it freedom, what I was feeling inside, because I wasn't free, right? But now I understand that fire, it was not random. It wasn't. It was legacy. If you take anything else from this, that is legacy. It's legacy living in me, flowing, a historical continuum going from person to person, right? It's going through them, right? It's going through them. So we can say, oh, she started that movement. No, it didn't start with Bethune. She wasn't the first person who understood Black people were brilliant. She started a school with $5. Can you imagine that? I don't know what $5 equates to now, but it still couldn't have been very much, right? And so it was legacy. So every single time that you teach Black history with truth, every single time you affirm identity, every time you refuse to reduce students to deficits, because I was at a deficit. I was at a deficit. I was running so slow. That's so crazy when I go back and think about that. Why you had to run with those girls? You were free. You were free, right? So every single time I do that, I pass on that fire. When I affirm students, I'm passing on that fire and then let it catch on. Every time I affirm their identity, passing on that fire. So just think about that. So I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me this. Which ancestors' thinking does your classroom, or even not even, excuse me, your classroom need right now and why? Or a situation that you're in, a community that you're in. What ancestors thinking do you need? Or which student's reality actually, felt closest to home. Students, you come across students who have adult responsibilities or who don't think they're smart enough, or you understand that black students deserve brilliance, right? They deserve to be fed. They understand that they are civic leaders. They just don't know it yet. A lot of time we're teaching that we're waiting for another Malcolm X. If we talk to our students, affirm them, they'll see they are, the next Martin Luther King or somebody like that, right? Remember, identity before achievement. This isn't about perfect answers. So you can answer if you relate to any of those. It's about just honest reflection. Let us reflect on what we're seeing in the classroom, what our students need, and that. Let me see. 1 second. Remember the blueprint, right? So one more thing. Before students, this is what I leave you again. Before students can perform for us, they need permission to be themselves. This is who you are, right? You don't have to shrink to belong. You don't have to disappear to belong, right? This is how you be you in this situation. We see young people don't know how to be them. They're trying to fit in a situation. They don't even like the situation. They don't like who they're being in that situation. Teach them how to be themselves in every situation if they understand who they are. Like, again, I go back to that. Those people who go to SBCUs, how they come out so proud, standing tall. It's just, I always loved it. I always loved that. That just was something for me. So remember, this is not extra work. It's absolutely not extra. This is the work. This is the work. Because we're trying to get people to learn their ABCs 1, 2, 3s, and they don't know who they are. That's a problem. I'm so smart, I know, but I need this and I need that. I have to sit in the classroom and be quiet. Talk, right? Express yourself. Be unafraid of your voice. A lot of us are afraid of our voice. I was that for so long. Now try to get me to be quiet. Right. Right. So that's who I am. So teach with wisdom, teach with truth, teach like freedom depends on it, because it absolutely does. I'm going to have something to put in the let me find it. I have two codes to put in the. So this code right here, I don't know. This code right here is what do you call it? This code right here is I'm gonna find the word for it. A companion to this blueprint. So if you scan this code, you'll get the companion to the blueprint. Just in case you need it, I think it's an awesome companion. It'll show you how to use this blueprint. Because the Bible says wisdom is the principal thing, but therefore get wisdom. With all that getting, get understanding. So you have the wisdom. So now let's understand how to use that wisdom, right? So if you scan that QR code, I don't know if I'm pointing in the right direction right here, and scan that QR code if you would like the companion to this blueprint. I'm here for it. Scan that and you will get it. So before students, again, I'm going to say it one more time. Before students can perform for us, they need permission to be themselves, right? That's not extra work. That is the work, right? And there's the tool that I have for you on that QR code. Inside, you'll find prompts, exercises, and ways to bring the legacy of our ancestors into your teaching every day. So scan that, claim your guide, and let's keep passing that fire on. Until next time, remember to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate you. I have another, excuse me. I have another QR code. I don't know if I need to leave that one up. This helps you become on my email list. I can put that later, but if you want this blueprint, if you want this, I'll leave that one up. If you want the blueprint companion, it's right there. So I'll leave it up just in case you're watching later. You come back and you're not watching live. There, that code is for the blueprint companion. And again, thank you for tuning in. I don't know if there are any reflections, questions, any insights before we go. That time went so fast. I started off a little, I started a little slow, but that time went pretty fast. And so if you have anything you would like to add, I'll give you a second, because I know that there's a lag in what I'm saying and when I'm leaving. So just remember that this is Educators with Oil podcast, and I'm your host, this Ronnette Branham. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for joining, and have a blessed rest of your day.
Subscribe to Educators with Oil podcast on your preferred platform and join Ronnette on this mission to empower teachers through the wisdom of the Bible. Because when biblical strategies meet the classroom, extraordinary teaching happens.
Educators, let's shine a light on our classrooms. See you on Educators with Oil podcast, where teaching and faith unite.